Hey, I'm Brian from Charge Cycle Works. Today we are going to show you how to service your FastAce forks. We're going to replace the seals and the oil and get these all cleaned up and ready to go again. So as you can see here, this fork has been leaking all over our desk. It's really dirty. Sure sign of a bad seal that needs to be replaced. First things first, I'm going to go clean these up. So here's a list of tools of everything that we're about to use to take apart this fork, service it, and put it back together. So first off, you need some type of graduated cylinder to measure your fluid. You're going to be measuring 150 milliliters and 300 milliliters. Of course, we need fork oil or fork fluid. So this is 5 weight. If you're a more aggressive or heavier rider, you might want to do a 7.5 weight. Some people use 10. That is getting pretty heavy, but if you feel like you need that heavy of a fork fluid, go ahead and use 10 weight. We need 2 sets of fork seals. Each box is for 1 leg, and we're servicing 2 legs here, so that's 2 boxes. You've got to be able to clean because the fluid that's in these forks is really nasty and you want to get it all out. And you want to clean out all of the dirt. You do not want dirt inside of your fork. I used a little bit of suspension grease on the seals just to make sure that the metal slides nice and freely through there and I don't risk nicking it. Now, speaking of nicking seals, you often see seal bullets being used. On these particular forks, you don't really need this, and I'm not going to use this in this video. Another optional tool is a seal driver to drive that seal down into the fork and make sure it's flush. Once again, nice to have, but you don't have to have this particular tool for these types of suspension. You can use your fingers. Now going back to the tools, we needed a small screwdriver to pry the dust seal out. We needed a large screwdriver. I recommend not using a screwdriver. Something like this with a bend in it, a mini pry bar works a lot better to get under that seal and pull it out. But be very careful because you can damage the metal on the aluminum tube. So be careful not to touch the aluminum tube while you're doing that. Now to get the fork cap off and the nut that's below the fork cap, I use these 2 Niplex wrenches. They work really good for that. If you don't have one of these, you are going to need a very narrow gauge wrench on the nut. On this particular fork, it was narrow. I've seen, I think it's on the Gen 1 forks, it's not as narrow, so you might be able to just use a normal wrench or an adjustable wrench, but on this particular fork, it was a very narrow and our normal wrenches did not fit. So that's all of the tools and supplies that you need to do this service. Let's get into it. On this fork, we can see a little bit of damage to the stanchion tube. They obviously rubbed up against a rock or something. It's not too bad, but over time that probably will cause the seal to fail again. There's no way for us to fix this, so we're just going to rebuild it and put it back together as is. The easiest way to clean this fork is going to be using Maxima Suspension Clean. This is a special formula meant specifically for forks. It won't harm your rubber seals or any of that. So highly recommended, super easy to clean in your garage. What I do with this is I actually hold the forks over a garbage can that's got like some paper towels in it or cardboard or something, and I just wash it all off into there so it's nice and easy and doesn't make a big mess. So let's go get this fork cleaned up. One note of caution, I am wearing safety glasses because nobody likes to get alcohol or whatever this is made of in your eye. That really sucks. So this is the version 2 FastAce, and you can tell it's a version 2 because the upper top cap is a little bit different, and this has an air bleed screw on it. Nothing fancy under here. You can unscrew this and it lets the excess air come out of the fork. We don't need to take that off, but I do need to take the top cap off. So whether you have a vise at home, make sure you use soft jaws in it so you don't scratch and dent and hurt your suspension, or I happen to have a fancy Race Tech clamp, so I'm going to use this. Now make sure you clamp where your triple clamps typically clamp onto the fork. There's a raised area right here, so that's where I've clamped it. It's stronger and more reinforced there, less likely that you can damage the fork. Now it also is helpful while this fork was on the bike, you can take this top cap off or at least loosen it while it's on the bike. Before you do that, you want to loosen your top clamp because you don't want it putting pressure up here. Loosen the top clamp, leave the bottom clamp tight on your bike, and then grab your wrench. Most people are going to use an adjustable wrench for this, and then you can break it loose. Sometimes these are hard, sometimes they're easy, but it is easier to do this, at least break it loose while it's on the bike. All right, so you're gonna need an adjustable wrench for the top cap, and then on the bottom nut that's holding it onto the damper tube rod, you do need a very shallow wrench. So in this case, I'm using 2 shallow adjustable wrenches to do this. So that wasn't on there very tight. So we're just removing the top cap at the moment. So now we've got the top cap off, I'm gonna drain the fluid out of here. Now this is the side that is not the damper, and there's almost no fluid coming out, probably because it mostly leaked out, so this has probably been leaking for quite some time. And I'm just gonna kind of stroke this back and forth to try and get the fluid to come out so I can minimize the mess I'm gonna make. Now one unique thing about these forks, on a traditional Emoto fork, you can't just pull these apart. You've got to remove the dust seal, and then there's a circlip in there. You have to remove the circlip, and then it's kind of a forceful action to force them apart. On these forks, they're a little different, and they should just pull apart without having to do that. Yep, just like that, the fork is apart. So I'm gonna let this fork drain for a minute, and we'll see you then. So overall, the inside of this fork looks pretty clean. You will notice a scuff mark here. Unfortunately, on this lower end suspension, it's not built like a motocross suspension where there's a friction collar up here to assist the fork sliding up and down inside the outer tube. And so you get this wear mark that's actually normal, so it's nothing to be concerned about. Mostly I'm just looking to see that everything is clean, and I'm going to use some more suspension clean to clean this up before we put it back together. All right, so first thing, we're gonna take the dust seal off. These come off usually pretty easy on these types of forks. So that's the dust seal. Now the actual oil seal is inside of here, and this is what's causing the leak, is there's a nick or some kind of wear or failure that's caused this to leak. So first we have to pull the retaining clip out of here. So just use your flat blade screwdriver, pull that out. You probably can do this with a flat blade screwdriver. However, it's easier with something angled like this, a little mini crowbar. And I've got this in my clamp again, so it holds it. I'm being careful not to mar the metal. So I'm gonna work my way around. And these are actually in there pretty tight. There it goes. So here we have the old seal and the old dust wiper. Those are going in the garbage now. Got my glasses on again, that means I'm gonna do some more cleaning. So where the seal was and inside the outer tube, I'm gonna do some more cleaning here just to make sure that we don't have any dirt. Now there was a washer in there, so that just fell out while I was cleaning. I'm just gonna leave it right there, but don't forget to put that back in. Okay, so when you get your new seals, we're using SKF Seals. They are the best seals on the market. You've got 2, just like before. You've got your dust wiper. I'm gonna set that aside for now. So here's the new dust seal. You can see that there's 2 different sides. So the more open side, that's gonna go inside the fork facing the inside. And so what's facing out the bottom is this side. I'm just gonna push this in with my fingers and just kind of work it around. So normally on a Emoto fork, you're using a seal driver to do this. Because these forks are constructed a little bit differently, I'm not using a seals driver, or you don't have to, this is optional. I am gonna put my seal driver, since I happen to have one, on here and just give it one little tap with my hand, just to make sure it's in there all the way. You know it's in there far enough if you've got the groove exposed for the retaining clip. So you can see, I can see the groove all the way around on top of the ring, and it's ready to put the retaining clip back in. So just use your fingers to guide that in. These are pretty easy. Make sure you hear a snap and that you can't get it back out. So that's all it is, it's in there now. Now that my new oil seal is in there, I'm gonna go ahead and insert the dust seal. Once again, on these forks, they're usually easy enough just to use your fingers to press them in there. So just making sure it's fully seated, and it is. So just like that, we've got new fork seals by SKF and our FastAce fork. One thing I am gonna do before I insert the lower into the upper, I've got some Racetech Ultra Slick grease here that's made for suspension. And I like to dab a little bit of that on the inside of both the seal and the wiper. That gives it a little bit of extra lubrication to make sure that the lower slides in without nicking it. So there is oil contained where the spring is in the brake side fork leg. I'm just trying to get the rest of the oil out of there. It's not a completely closed system. You can see that there's holes here where the oil gets sucked in when you put the new oil in, and right now it's coming out of the damper tube. I'm having to make a bit of a mess and cycle this on my desk up and down to force all that oil out of there, and it's definitely slowly coming out. Now, if you really want to take this apart, this is Loctited, and you could take this apart and remove the spring and clean all this out. Most people in their garage is probably not going to do that. So I'm just going to cycle as much as the old oil as I can out of there by moving this up and down. And it's not really leaking out any longer. So I'm just going to kind of let this gravity drain for a little bit while we're off camera and get as much oil out as I can. All right, I've let this gravity drain for a little bit. I'm just going to wipe it off. And another reason we're not fully disassembling this to clean out the inner chamber here is there's no dampening happening on this side. There's only a spring in here. So the fluid doesn't have to be perfectly clean the way it does on the damper side. If you're anal and you want to take this apart and get it fully clean, go for it. But most people, there's no need to do that. Okay, so we've got the upper tube. We've already got the seals installed. I'm going to carefully install this. I've got a little bit of grease on there. Just making sure that I pull it on straight. Just like that, we're back together. So next I'm going to install this cap back on here. So we're going to screw this on until it bottoms out. It just bottomed out on the tube. And I'm going to put this back in my clamp. Okay, so now it's back in the clamp. I need to get a wrench on the retaining nut. And another one. So now we're just going to screw these back together and put a little bit of tension on there. These are aluminum pieces, so you don't want to He-Man them, but you want a little bit of tension so that they don't come loose while you're riding. Okay, this is fully back together. Last step is to pour some fork fluid into here. So on the brake side, which is the side that we just serviced that has the spring inside of it, no dampening, use 150 milliliters of suspension fluid. We are going to use 5-weight, which is the standard. If you're a heavier or faster or big jumping person, you might want to go to a 7-weight. And if you want to put a lot more dampening in it, maybe go to a 10-weight. This is a pretty average rider, so we're going to stick with 5-weight. So we're going to 150 milliliters on the spring side. Just going to slowly pour it in here and try not to make a mess. Now the oil did come to the top, so be careful of that, and it's slowly seeping back down into the bottom. So I'm going to drop the lower tube down because it was starting to fill up, so be careful of that. You don't want it to overflow on you. We've got all of our fork fluid in there. I can see it, and we're okay to put it back together. So I have the fork cap on there hand tight. I'm just going to finish with the wrench. Once again, you can do this once it's back on the bike if you don't have a vise. All right, just like that, this fork is back together. We have new seals. It's not going to leak on us for a while longer, and it still works. Now let's do the other leg. Okay, so now we're on the non-brake side, which is the damper side, and you can tell because it's got a clicker adjustment down on the bottom of the fork leg. This is your compression adjuster. Before I take this apart, I'm going to screw this all the way in, and I'm going to count how many clicks. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So this was 12 out. So when you're adjusting clickers on suspension, you go all the way in and then you back it back out, and that's how many clicks are in your adjustment. So this one was set to 12 clicks out. The compression adjuster is all the way in, and I've recorded that it was at 12 clicks. I'm now going to back it all the way out. So all the way out till it stops. This is just to prevent the needle from getting damaged while we're servicing the forks. I'm going to flip the fork around, and we're going to do the same on the top. This is the rebound adjuster. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Yeah, 13. So this was set to 13 out, and then I'm going to back it all the way out until it stops. All right, now let's put it back in the clamp. All right, so this other leg is going to be quite repetitive, so we're probably going to fast forward. And if I talk, I'm going to sound like Mickey Mouse, so let's just get to it. Okay, so this side does not have a spring in it. It's just dampening, so I can move this up and down real easily. Once again, I'm going to grip this with a small pliers and use the big one on the top, and then I'm going to break this loose. These aren't on there that tight. The reason I'm having to put the wrench on here is as I was turning it, the bottom nut went down and the top cap was not actually threading off of the damper tube. So I had to go back to using a wrench to to break that loose, but now it's coming off. And there is Loctite on that. It's making a little bit of a mess, so we're going to want to clean that up before we put this back together. Now there might be something underneath this cap, so be careful. There's probably, yep, oh, and I just dropped it. Careful not to drop that inside of the fork. There's actually a small adjuster nut. So this is what fell out of there. Be very careful. This is the damper side, not the spring side. And you don't want to lose this, because what that is, you can see how it looks like a little screwdriver in there. And this goes inside of there, and this screws in and out of the damper tube. And this is what adjusts your rebound dampening characteristics. So don't lose this, and when you put it back together, you're going to put these two surfaces together so that the screwdriver looking bit is actually turning that. Okay, so we're going to take it back out of the clamps, and we are going to dump the oil. Now this side should have a lot more oil in it. And you can see the damper rod adjuster is coming out. This has a needle on the bottom side, so when we reinsert this, the needle is going to the bottom of the fork. I'm going to set that aside for now. We're going to drain the oil out of here. Now there's supposed to be 300 milliliters of oil in here, but I think most of it has leaked out because there's definitely not that much coming out. And once again, these forks will just pull right apart. There's nothing holding them together, which is very different than a Emoto fork. So I'm going to let this gravity drain, and I'm going to go clean out this outer fork leg over a trash can. Okay, so before I go clean this, I just need to pull the seals out. They don't need to be in here while I'm cleaning because they just are dirty and I don't want them in there. Especially on a fork that's been leaking as much as this, there's probably some dirt that's gotten inside. Pull the retaining clip out. So these seals are in here pretty tight, but just keep working your way around and eventually they'll pop out. You might put your hand over the top so when it does go, it doesn't go flinging across your garage. There we go. All right, so you did notice a lot of cycles, a lot of cleaner. I'm spraying the cleaner down inside of the damper rod into the chamber. I'm cycling it to basically give it a bath while it's in the bottom. And I'm just trying to get as much of this gross, weird oil that is used by the Chinese factories. It is not high quality suspension fluid and I want all of it out. So I'm using a lot of cleaner to make sure that when I dump it for the last time, I'm seeing clear fluid come out and not the yellowish orangey fluid that was in here. So I think we're just about done. It's probably my last cycle. Go to the inside of the damper tube, in the chamber. Give it a little bath. I'm wearing safety glasses so I don't get this stuff in my eyes. All right. That's finally starting to look pretty clear. I think we have this clean and it's ready to go back together. Okay, so let's put the new fork seals in the non-brake side or the non-spring side, which has the dampening in it. So once again, make sure there was a washer inside, so make sure that washer is back in there if you took it out. I'm just going to press this in with my fingers. And since I do have a fork seal driver here, I am going to use that, but this is optional. All right, the retainer clip has clipped in. It's nice and secure, it's not loose. So now we can install the dust wiper. Just validate that it's flush against the metal and there's no gaps. And I'm going to put a little bit of Ultra Slick seal grease on here from Race Tech. This just helps give a little bit extra protection when the metal goes into the seal. Now obviously I've cleaned both the outer tube and the inner tube extensively. Still have a little bit of cleaning fluid dripping out, but that's all right. And I'm just going to carefully insert this, making sure it goes in nice and straight. And just like that, there's the damper rod. All right, so we are on the damper side of the fork now. This takes a lot more oil. Instead of 150 on the spring side, we're doing 300 on this side. Now on the spring side, it does not matter what fluid you use. It doesn't matter if you use 2, 3, 5, 7, 10. It makes no difference on the performance. All it is lubrication. Now that we're on the damper side, this is where the fork weight oil makes a difference. So as I said before, I'm going to use a standard 5 weight because this is a pretty average rider on this bike. If it was a heavy rider or a rider that does a lot of jumping, I might do a 7.5 or even a 10. And the thicker oil will flow slower through the valving stack and cause the fork to be stiffer and less compliant and less plush. But for a heavy person or a big jumper, that's a good thing. So we're going to put 300 milliliters in here. All right, I'm going to fill this one without the cap on. It's just a little bit easier because the cylinder's not going to hit the cap. Do be careful though, because it is possible that your lower fork tube could fall out of the upper because there is nothing holding it together. So I'm going to support it with my other hand while I pour to make sure it doesn't slide out the bottom and release all this brand new oil that I'm putting in. Or I should say fluid. This is suspension fluid, not oil. I am watching to make sure I don't overflow. Now you can cycle this up and down if you want to help get the oil down all the way into the base valve. That'll happen naturally when it's on the bike, so you don't have to do that, but it does help get the oil down into the base. So I can feel the air bubbles are leaving the valve stack, and it's getting more consistent as I stroke this up and down. Now be careful because it can squirt oil out of the damper tube while you're doing that. So I'm just doing it nice and slow. All right, that's probably enough because like I said, this will self-bleed once it's on the bike. All right, before I put the top cap back on, remember we had the adjuster rod, needle side goes down. That needs to go back inside of your damper tube. And if you remember, I dropped something on the floor earlier. That little tiny adjuster nut, it sits right on top of that adjuster rod. It is threaded, so I'm going to kind of push it in. So I'm pushing down and I'm rotating to try to catch a few threads while my gloves try to also catch some threads. Okay, so I've caught a few threads and it's sitting in there, it's not coming out, and that's where we want it. So now we can put the top cap back on. Now we need that little screwdriver looking piece. We need them to align. So I'm just going to rotate this. Okay, and I can feel it clicking and it's moving freely. And now I can rotate it the rest of the way on. So this fork cap actually kind of got stuck and hung up on that little tiny nut. And to free it back up, I rotated the adjuster and I can hear it clicking and it's freely rotating that again. So this is working properly, and now it's screwing all the way down onto the damper rod. So be careful. That's the only technical thing about this job to be careful about. So that's back flush. Screw it down until the set nut is up against the... All right. Now we're back together, and simply screw the top cap back on, and we're going to be done. Well, almost done. We've got some clickers to readjust. Okay, so early in the video, I had you back this clicker all the way out, and it was because of that nut sitting on there. And we also did the compression. So it was all the way out. I'm gonna turn it all the way in, and I'm not gonna adjust it back to what this guy had it adjusted to, because I know better settings than he did. A lot of people don't understand clickers very well. I'm all the way in. I'm gonna only back out 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then I'm gonna do the same thing on the compression side. My screwdriver. I'm gonna screw it all the way in. All the way in is stiffest. And then I'm gonna back it out 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This was set, I think it was 12 and 12 or 10 and 12, whatever it was. And I like this to be a lot stiffer, so I'm 6 and 6. So obviously 6 and 6 on the clickers is just kind of general guidance. Every rider's different. Some people like to go more like 3, which is super stiff. I don't recommend going all the way to 0 because the valve is essentially closed and you do want oil to flow through there. If you're having to go 3 or less, or even really 5 or less, that's a good sign that you probably want to have your suspension retuned, which is a service that we provide. But 6 and 6 is a good starting point. These forks often come all the way open, which is a bad thing because the circuit's all the way open and too much oil is flowing through. So we like to start 6 and 6 and then go from there. If it's too harsh, you can try loosening the top, which is the rebound, to try to get it to go faster. And then if it's bottoming out on bumps, you can play with the bottom side, which is your compression. So use the rebound to make it more active and more plush, and use the compression to prevent bottom outs. All right, so you just saw how to service your forks to replace the seals that were leaking, something that happens a lot on these forks. Now this was a much higher quality seal by SKF, so they should last a lot longer than the factory seals. Now, if this was intimidating to you and you don't have the tools or the space to do this, we offer this as a service. You can send your fork tubes just like this. We don't want the whole triple. You can send them to us and we will do this for you. So look in the description below and find a link for this fork service. We also offer full damper tunes. So if you want a specific feeling for your fork, a lot of people who like to race or jump want this type of service. You can send the fork to us and we will do more than just what you saw today. We'll actually take apart the damper, we'll retune the damper and put nice quality fork fluid in it, and you'll have a custom tuned fork specifically for your needs. So check the description below for a link to custom tuned forks as well. So that was for the FastAce fork. Obviously there's a lot of other forks out there on the market. If you want to see a video like this for your fork, leave a comment. We'll read those comments, and if there's any particular fork where there's a lot of comments, we'll consider making a video for that fork. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you again.